Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. My name is Lanae Erickson. I'm a SVP at Third Way, and I am excited to talk with a couple of very interesting folks today about what is going on in the state of Arizona. So we are all seeing Arizona in the national news pretty much daily at this point. They're in the throes of a public health crisis. COVID is wreaking havoc on the state. It's obviously a must-win state for Democrats to take back the Senate. And to me, it seems increasingly likely that it could actually decide whether Trump gets a second term. So all eyes in DC and across the country are on the state. And we wanted to get a better understanding of really what's happening on the ground. So we've got two fantastic folks here who can help us flesh that out today. My first guest is Congressman Ruben Gallego, who represents Arizona's 7th District. He is the Assistant Whip for the Democratic Caucus. He served in the Marines and then in the U.S. House of Representatives. I wonder which of those was harder. Maybe we can ask that question later. And he just has his finger on the politics in this state and obviously as well on the welfare of the folks that are there. And then we also have Joshua Ulibarri, who's a partner at Lake Research and one of our favorite pollsters to use on a variety of topics lately. He was the first Latino pollster to be named Pollster of the Year by the American Association of Political Consultants. And last cycle, he successfully defended what was deemed the most vulnerable House Dem seat in 2018, who was Representative Tom Halloran in Arizona's 1st District. Josh is also based in Arizona, and so he has a hometown feel of what's going on there as well. So before I open up the conversation to our guests, I just want to remind you all on the phone that we want to get you into this conversation too. So if you have questions throughout, please put them in Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You can type your questions in. And with about 20 minutes left, I'll start asking your questions. So with that, let me just start kind of at the 30,000 foot level. You know, I always thought of Arizona as a pretty solidly red state that wasn't even on the map for Democrats. And now it's a target both obviously for the Senate majority and for ousting Trump. Can you just give us, and maybe Congressman, we'll start with you, a sense of the general political dynamics? What's going on the ground in Arizona right now in politics?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us, and it's good to see Josh. Josh and I have actually been involved in Arizona politics since 2006. I think it's the first time you and I met.
That's right.
And note, the reason we met in 2006 is because Arizona was also the first state to defeat a gay marriage ban at the ballot box. And this is in the big red states of 2006. So what's going on the ground right now in Arizona? On the politics level, the state has been trending blue for a while. We had certain hiccups that I think people kind of interpreted as the state still being red. Number one, in 2008, when you had President Obama running, there was no investment in Arizona because he was running against the hometown hero of John McCain, right? So we kind of missed the cycle that, was able to push the states like New Mexico, Nevada, and Colorado over the edge into being more bluish because they had the infrastructure, they had the investment, and because they were swing states. And then in 2012, they were again, had the same investment. Now, 2012, we kind of missed the boat, though you did start seeing some changes starting in 2012, where some of the outer lying suburban districts of Phoenix and Pima County started electing Democratic state reps and state senators. And the reason that matters is because people forget Arizona is very urban. They think like we're just, there's tumbleweeds rolling through here and there's cattle everywhere. 80% of the population of Arizona is going to be found in urban areas. And if you've seen the trend that's been happening across the country, urban and suburban areas have been starting to trend more and more Democratic. 2016 was, a really good indication of that. There's two things that I think people forget in 2016 that happened. Number one, Sheriff Joe Arpaio was defeated in Maricopa County by double digits. And the reason that matters because Sheriff Joe Arpaio is the proto-Trump. He was the original Trump, right? If anything, Trump learned from him. But what you saw in 2012 is 2006, people just sick of his shenanigans. his, blatant misuse of funds, the drama, and it was a defeat for him, and it came at the hands of two people, moderate independent voters and surging young Latino voters that were coming out to vote, both against Trump and for Hillary Clinton. In my opinion, if not for the Comey letter hitting in Arizona, hitting across the country, at that time, Arizona probably would have actually gone to the Hillary Clinton camp. We saw a dip in terms of younger voters turning in ballots when that happened. I think at that point, a lot of people just kind of just threw out their hands and just walked away. But we still also at the same time picked up seats again in those suburbs. 2018 ended up being the perfect storm where the Democrats, both in Arizona, we pick up 4 statewide seats. We pick up the first Democratic senator since 1988. We pick up a congressional seat down in southern Arizona. We nearly take the House. We nearly take the Senate. I think Josh will give you more clear details about that, but we only missed it by a couple thousand votes combined across the state. And that, again, is the reason you saw that success was a combination of that community, right? Your suburban, moderate voter women, some of them Republican, a lot of independents, and then a surging Latino population that's becoming more and more Democratic. And the reason, this is my opinion, but Josh could probably explain better or could have a different theory. The reason you're also seeing Latinos becoming more politically active in Arizona is because if you think about the timeline of political activism in Arizona, in 2010, we had SB 1070. And at that point, that was a fairly contentious time. I mean, I was out protesting with everybody. We were hitting the streets. But the
show me your papers law, right?
Yeah, show me your papers law, exactly. Yeah. If a police suspected of you being in this country illegal, they could pull you over on no grounds and ask for your papers. And the state that's 30% Latino, you're going to potentially be pulling in over a lot of people. But we didn't win in 2010. Everyone thought that this was going to be the big sleeping giant, but the Latino community does not make up a majority of the electorate in Arizona. So the only way we win is through coalitions. But we did have increased activism from there. From the SB 1070 movement, though, you have a lot of the leaders of today. I'm a member of Congress. I was one of the protest organizers. The mayor of Phoenix was also one of the protest organizers. State reps, state senators came out from there. There was this increased awareness from other outside organizations that came and started giving money and helping us, start organizing here. Some of these groups, Josh probably knows and worked with, like Lucha, does like voter registration drives every year and have been since 2012. There's one group called One Arizona, which does massive voter registration. So after every year, we've been continuing moving forward. And then the right candidates came along. And so the candidates you want in Arizona, because someone's going to ask about this, they have to be the candidates that can bring both sides in. You can't just win with moderate voters, and you can't just win with Latino voters. You either have to be the candidate that can bring them both together, or there has to be such an outside massive threat to both communities that they look for anybody. And what you saw in 2018 is exactly that. The candidates that could bring them both together are the ones that won statewide. The candidates that couldn't bring them both together, unfortunately, failed. Arizona in 2020, in my opinion, is going to end up being a Democratic state for President Biden. Kelly's going to win. I would not be surprised if Kelly wins by close to 8 to 9 points. I think Biden may win this by 5 to 6 points. That's not based on polling or anything like that, just kind of what I'm seeing right now. And it's just a combination of just a lot of bad things happening. Number one, the Republican governor of Arizona horribly mismanaged COVID-19. You may hear it on the background. I have my TV set to local TV every morning. And every morning, 50% of the conversation is COVID-19. What's going to happen with COVID-19? How it's affecting everybody with COVID-19. And now the second phase of this is what's going to happen with schools. So there is no way that when early balloting starts in Arizona, which starts first week in October, parents are still going to be talking about whether they should send their kids to school. The economy is probably still going to be the doldrums. The governor right now his numbers are so low. It's even lower than President Trump. But I also saw President Trump's number at -24 in Arizona in terms of disapproval with COVID-19. They're just not going to be able to get their way out of this. And the state was already trending blue anyway prior to that, right? Prior to COVID-19, there were polls showed that both Kelly and Biden were winning. And I think that's just going to happen. And the fact is, like, Biden's character and the type of candidate he is actually a pretty perfect fit for Arizona. And we have to run all the way through. We certainly have to do some, I think we'll do some work with younger Latinos to get them engaged and get them to turn out. And I think a lot of them will do that and will come home, but you have to put the work in. But I feel very confident if you put the investments in Arizona, and I've seen them a lot. Trust me, I turn on my TV right now. And if you're from Arizona, you never would see presidential campaigns on Friday, July 10th, commercials. That's crazy to us, but it's there. And so I feel very comfortable right now, and we just have to keep continuing moving forward.
So Josh, the congressman put a lot of numbers on the table already, which I feel like people aren't usually wanting to do. So now you get to react to his predictions. What are you seeing in the numbers and just even in your interaction with folks in the state?
Yeah, and I'll say that the congressman a couple times he said not really seeing any polling numbers. A lot of this is on instinct and how it feels, and all of that feels very. Not to echo what the congressman said, all of that feels really, really good. I've yet to see a poll in the last 4 weeks that doesn't have Biden ahead. Yet to see a poll probably in the last 10 months that doesn't have Kelly ahead in measurable ways. And heavily involved in the state Senate and the state House work that the congressman mentioned as well. And all of that looks really good as well. None of that has anything, in terms of that work outside, the margin of error. So all of it's going to be a real struggle. The one piece I'd like to add, though, on that is, the congressman gave you this really awesome outlook on the last 12 years, but it has been a really good buildup in this state since 2010, as he mentioned in the SB 1070 bill. The first sign of this state sort of moving in the right direction was the recall of Russell Pierce, who was the author of the SB 1070 bill. We recalled him, and you saw a lot of national money left Arizona in 09 and 08 because of how bad the Republicans were running things and how bad the state looked. And so you had a ton of grassroots organizations that Ruben mentioned, the congressman mentioned, get together and really organize the state. And in 2012, we picked up 4 state Senate seats, which just so each of these cycles we're picking up races, but things look really good right now. I'm a little, more bullish, I may disagree slightly on sort of, a Clinton winning in 16 absent Comey. I was glad to see her in the state, but probably would have preferred her in Wisconsin that week. As opposed to in Arizona, but things are really closer and looking really good. But there's a ton of work to do with some of these demographic groups we might be able to talk about.
Yeah. So one of the things a lot of the national conversation's been obsessed with since 2016, as you mentioned, Josh, is Wisconsin, the blue wall, and rightly so. Certainly if Biden can flip those 3 states back, then he'll be the next president. But there may be slightly different dynamics happening in the Sun Belt than in those places, whether it's economically or with COVID or with the demographic change. And I'll start with you on this, Josh. What do you think distinguishes the dynamics happening in Arizona from either national or kind of the uber focus on the Midwest that really makes Arizona unique right now?
Yeah, and again, I think the congressman set this up really well, which is, first of all, it's a Western state, right? There aren't Western swing states right now. New Mexico looks really good. Colorado looks really good. Nevada looks really good. Arizona is the only sort of Western swing state, and that comes with different demographic profiles. I think the second piece is there is a big Latino Hispanic population, and while that exists also in Florida in terms of big numbers and important in Georgia and North Carolina and some lower single digit numbers, we are looking at 19-20% of the electorate being Hispanic and Latino here, which makes us a little different than other states. And then I think the other piece is, a lot of folks think that Arizona is really old, right? We think there's a bunch of sunbirds, people coming in and leaving. It's actually not as old as people think, primarily because the Latino population is so young. And so I think those are the kinds of demographic things that make the state differently. Obviously, we are a border state in terms of being a swing state. There aren't any other border states that are swing states. And so immigration has a big pull here. both in terms of putting that coalition together that the congressman mentioned, winning over those moderate suburban Anglos, but energizing this younger progressive base that has, really fueled the change in the state. So how do you build that coalition around an immigration discussion? How do you allow now Senator Kyrsten Sinema and some of these other congressional Democrats running in office to sort of operate on a more moderate plane, so that our progressives underneath being pretty progressive at the doors. So I think that's a different combination too. So it's a Latino population, a Western population. We're on the border, in terms of the U.S. border, and then we are as well. The last point I'll make sort of on that piece is you've got a lot of new immigrants from California coming into the state, for example, and these are 10 years ago would have been traditional Republicans, right? Socially moderate, but more fiscally, sort of conservative. And they move into this state and they see how extreme these Republicans are and how extreme the party has become, period, under Trump. And they see a party that's much more open to having this kind of a conversation and building a coalition to make the changes we want to make and need to make.
Yeah. Congressman, is there anything you want to add there about kind of the unique nature of Arizona compared to some of the other battleground states that folks are really focused on?
The one thing I think I feel, and people, may not intuitively understand this, is that in other states, the making people fear like the hordes of immigrants coming in still works. I think Arizona has kind of started to become more immune to those arguments because we've been dealing with the fear mongering of, the dangerous immigrants now for almost 20 years, I would say, Josh, probably. Yeah. And so this is why you saw in 2000, I thought it was not the best decision making by the Republicans, that they were trying to scare people to vote, for Republicans based on the caravans and this or that. Like, it does have some sway, but doesn't have as much impact now, I think, as it does like in other states, but I think are less exposed to this issue.
I know.
I think in terms of the swing populations, I think that's true. I think in terms of our sort of the younger generation, our activists, the kinds of voters we need to activate, it's a little bit of a different conversation. And that's the tension you have in Arizona that the congressman leaned into earlier in terms of building this coalition is, running aggressive, folks like now Senator Sinema and Secretary of State Hobbs, sort of having to build this coalition on top, but our activists underneath energizing our base and turning them out.
Yeah. So let's talk about Senator Sinema for a minute. That she is a person who has pushed back on the left in some instances and also has really energized a lot of people and was able to, as the congressman noted, put together a Senate coalition in the state where a Democrat hadn't won in a very long time. Did you all see specific things that she did or said or ways she approached this coalition that Mark Kelly or Biden or others should learn lessons from for this next cycle?
Well, I think what she did was really smart in the sense that she knew where she had control in terms of bringing the votes. It was with the more moderate suburban voters. The base was either going to come out because of an anti-Trump vote, or because we're going to come out for other issues. And there's a very strong network of nonprofits that specialize in get out the vote programs here in Arizona, specifically to Latino communities. And so she bet correctly that sticking to a very moderate point of view, avoiding the wedge issues that usually turn off moderate voters would still end up being a winning situation. And that's exactly what happened. So her messaging was aimed at the middle. You didn't see much messaging towards progressives or Latinos specifically, but she also knew that someone else was going to take care of that. So spend your time, spend your money, spend your effort and your political capital on this slice of the population, and the other half was going to come in anyway. And that's exactly what happened. And you can do that in places like Arizona for a couple of reasons, but you can't do it all the time, just to be clear. Number one, you have to have an overall bigger boogeyman. And that's someone like Donald Trump or Sheriff Joe Arpaio. I wouldn't say young, Democrats in Arizona are progressive, but they're also very rational because they've lived in Republican states. So they're going to try to get people elected first beyond I think a lot of other issues. So, having the right campaign matters, having the right candidate matters, having the right motivation coming out matters. I would say that in Arizona, in the 2020 election, we have, I think, two things that are going to help bring young people out to vote. Number one, there's going to be legalizing marijuana on the ballot. And number two, there's going to be a tax increase on the top income earners in the state that's going to go directly to education, which I think is going to help progressives come out, but as well as even women who are worried about education, public education in Arizona.
Yeah. Josh, any lessons you took away from 18 and Sinema's race?
Yeah, for sure. And, the congressman mentioned this in the very beginning, but, back in 06, the congressman managed the the so-called right. Gay marriage ban. And this now senator was the sort of public face of that conversation, so, and then we did the polling for that. So it goes way back. She is incredibly disciplined, and she did not pop any of her own traps. And she did not give those Republicans any room to pull her into any kinds of fights that she didn't want to be on. And she had, what she's able to do is signal progressive in terms of, first of all, just signal progressive in terms of gender and look and image and brand. And secondly, signal progressive in terms of choice, very strong on abortion rights and very strong on LGBT equality. And so those bona fides were really very good for her. There was some tension on the immigration conversation, but as the congressman said, we were able to have two kinds of conversations, one with those moderates we needed and two with the progressives underneath. What's the alternative here in that case? But she's been very, had good conversations with folks, but incredibly disciplined. And I think just excited a lot of people in that campaign, and is a great model for Kelly. I mean, obviously Kelly is not a woman. Kelly is not himself LGBT in sort of any kind of identifying way. And, doesn't have the excitement factor, but we've learned a lot in terms of being disciplined, not popping those traps for them, and how to build these coalitions. So I think number one, she was just incredibly disciplined, didn't make any mistakes, and didn't open herself up to mistakes. And the last thing I'll say is, this was for her and for everybody in that race. It was not a question of the Democrats taking control of the United States Senate. If you'll remember, there was all this conversation of could have happened in 18. That was never the fight in this campaign, because if that was the fight, if one of our messages was, do you want the Democrats to take control, then that activates these moderate Republicans who don't want necessarily Democrats to take control. They wanted Kyrsten Sinema in the United States Senate, but not sure they wanted Democrats in control. And we were really able to have not allow that kind of fight that came in and invaded the conversation the way it didn't, Senate campaigns in the past, like 16 in Kansas, for example.
Yeah, interesting. So let's talk for a minute about actually voting. Arizona is a place that has a lot of mail-in vote. You're very equipped for this COVID era, which is great. But it also has meant that your election results sometimes take time. And, Senator Sinema, that race wasn't called until a week after Election Day. Martha McSally was up by, I think, about 50,000 votes on election night, and then that switched over the next week. So it's possible that that's the scenario we see again, either for the Senate or the president, the presidential. So what should we be doing now to prepare voters in the entire country potentially for a lengthy counting in your state?
Well, it won't be actually. So the Secretary of State and the County Recorder have actually upgraded their process, and actually the State House and State Senate, signed by the governor, passed a law that actually allows them to start tabulating earlier. So you'll see, so I don't think Arizona's going to be the problem. I think you're going to have states that don't usually do the VBM program, vote by mail program, are going to have the bigger problem. I mean, and yes, Sinema, quote unquote, didn't win 2 weeks later, but everybody in Arizona knew she had won. Yeah. The night when the ballots dropped and she was down 50,000 votes, we all knew she had won at that point, because we track our numbers here in Arizona. We get a daily update about who voted and who hasn't voted. So starting, like 2 days after the first ballot drops, we can actually see, if our voters are coming out or not. And going into election night, we saw the trend moving more and more our direction. And for example, I knew that on election night, when they announced that, 70,000 people voted in my district, I still knew there was another 60,000 ballots that were still outstanding. And so, in my district usually breaks, for Democrats very heavily. And plus also where things were going in other parts of the state, we all knew it was over. So in Arizona, I think we're going to know pretty quickly on election night. The first ballot drop by statute has to happen at 8 p.m. At 8 p.m., the Secretary of State will be putting out tabulation from all the counties. If at 8 p.m. you see any Democrat winning Maricopa County by 4 to 5 points, I think it's basically over. It's very, very difficult to overcome that.
Well, that's the best news that I've heard all week, because I've been up at night worried about what's going to happen there. So
I wish I'm a little less confident, not in terms of the numbers and looking at a +5 in Maricopa, yes, but in terms of being able to, that it's going to happen as quickly on election night as it is, because we're going to have record turnout in this state and record ballots to count. And it's not just our base that's motivated. Their base is equally motivated. Right. There's going to be record turnout in terms of ballots to get through, and I think more turnout on election day. The piece I'm a little, so we have a great experience with this. The challenge for us is we need to continue to register voters and get them moved to the PEVL, which is a permanent early voting list. Yeah. And the way that COVID has impacted our ability to do that kind of organizing is harm to us, is a problem to us. And we're finding ways to overcome it. We're working that system, but that's going to be a continued issue for us, is that we still have a ton of vote to go out and organize and register, and that's been slowed down. And you see that's across the country. I'm sure you've had panels about this. So, and that's affecting us as well. And so there's still work for us to go out and do and get that done. I think that the Kelly race is going to be a bigger advantage, I think, than the Trump-Biden. So I think we might be waiting on that one. And the problem is, of course, the president every day talking about, why are we waiting? This is over. I've won, et cetera. Yeah. That's a problem that is undoing our democracy. That's tougher for us to come back on. And so I think that's going to be an ongoing problem for us. The way he tried to undermine the now Senator Sinema's victory over time is going to be an ongoing problem for us. But hopefully we just overwhelm them, as the Congressman said. If we're up 5 in Maricopa, I agree entirely on our election night. This is a done deal.
Yeah. And the other thing is, Arizona has now adopted what's called, basically you go to any polling place, even if it's not in your precinct, to get a ballot. And so so for the primary, they're opening up 100 of those locations for a month. I think they're using that, as a this is Maricopa County. I think they're going to use that as a standard also for the general, which would be really, really important. That's something that actually is very new in Arizona. We tend to only have a couple of days of early voting where you can actually go to a polling place. Yeah. If we have 30 days of early voting, that could be a huge dynamic shift, especially for the population that Josh just mentioned, young Latinos that are registered but aren't on the PEVL. And the PEVL, for everyone who wants to know, is the permanent early voter list. Basically, I don't have to request a ballot every year. I'm on this permanent early voter list. I automatically get sent a ballot every year for every election. And in the past, that was something that barely benefited Republicans, but Democrats have been able to catch up on that. And particularly Latinos have been really quick to adapt on that too. And that has been very, very helpful. But it is dangerous, not the PEVL, but the fact that we don't have a lot of younger Latinos on there. One of the largest demographics that came out and voted last time on election day were young Latinos. We don't want to see that. We want to see them voting early at the mail or at an early polling place.
I will just add to that, Lanae, to get you out of this question real quickly, is that we've seen great reform in the Maricopa County because of a local election victory. Right? We won the county recorder's office in 16, up for re-election in 20, had a horrible person in charge in 16. And had we not won that election, we wouldn't see 100 places open for early vote. We wouldn't see renewed interest in sort of a more liberalized, get everybody to vote kind of attitude. We'd have keep the young people off the ballots, keep the brown people away from getting the ballots, that kind of conversation. So that election 16 is having ramifications that's going to make the Kelly victory, make the Biden victory all the more possible.
Yep.
Super interesting. So I'm getting a lot of questions in the chat. So I'm going to get some of those folks in, and I'm going to start with my friend Doug Wilson, who.
Oh, Dougie, he was the campaign manager for the last time we won here in Arizona.
Yeah, that's what he says. He says, I ran Arizona in 96, which remains the only Dem victory in the state since Truman. The key then was women, suburban women, independent women, disaffected GOP women, added to the traditional Dem base, which of course includes Hispanics. Ruben has been instrumental in increasing the Hispanic vote in his district, but the Hispanic voting numbers in Arizona have traditionally been below the potential that Josh implies. What do you think will be different this time around in terms of Hispanic?
Josh, you want to go first, and then
yeah, sure. I'd love that question. You know, I will tell you that I have and I did some charting before this call. In the last 6 weeks, I've conducted 3,400 interviews in the state of Arizona, from legislative work to statewide ballot work to some targeted work on some of our districts, some of our women candidate districts, and I've yet to see a poll, to Doug's point, that makes me feel good about where Hispanic and Latino voters are right now. We are not performing, a lot of these close races, we'd be ahead if we were where we need to be with Latinos and Hispanics. And we continue to lag behind doing the work we need to do in these communities for all sorts of reasons. So I think it's really important for us is to recognize we're not where we need to be, especially, they're going to be there for Biden because of Trump. It's going to take work, but they're going to be there for Kelly because of, the way we're going to target them and work them. For us, are they going to be down ballot for us on these state legislative races that really matter? And so I'm really quite nervous. I'm going to send out a memo next week about this data trend we're seeing there for these down ballot races. Tons of potential there, but these are Western Latinos, Western Hispanics, and a lot of our Latinos in this state, as Ruben said, they are, as the congressman said, they're in Tucson, they are in Phoenix, but a lot of them are in Pinal and are in some of these more rural Latinos who are not the same as Phoenix Latinos, who take different messaging, who respond differently. And that's where a couple of our pickup seats are. And so lots of work for us need to do. And, you think about that other seat that Tipernini and Malik are going after. That's a place where there's a rural Latino vote that we have to go and activate, and they're not where they need to be now. So I see great potential there. And we're a very rich party. We don't have to make a choice between funding persuasion and funding base. We can make both decisions, and if we don't get our act together there, I'm really nervous about some of the things that the congressman and I have, looking forward to materializing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Doug brings up a good point. The numbers are there, but the investment needs to happen. And I think there's been too long an attitude, and we've been saying this for years, that people just expect the Latino community to come out, but don't spend any money on it. Don't do any persuasion. Don't do any motivation or anything else like that. That has to happen. You have to spend the money. And the numbers are the numbers. I think one of the things people look at and get confused by, though, is that the Latino community is very young, very mobile, and poor, right? Those three things also contribute to whether you can vote or not, right? Average Latino will probably move, young Latino will probably move 2 times between presidential elections, right? And so is voting a priority there? No, but is voting a priority for anybody that moves 2 times, is working probably just above minimum wage job, probably only has a couple degrees for community college? No. So it requires work. It requires time. Now the numbers have been moving in the right direction. Largely the numbers have been moving in the right direction because the Latino community has been getting older and more politically sophisticated. But we're still way too young. I mean, I think Josh probably correct me. The average age of Latino in Arizona is 25 or something like that. So that tells you how many people are older and even younger than that. So when people look at Arizona and it's like the population of Arizona is about 32% Latino, they automatically assume like, well, we should be at 32%, voter participation or part of the electorate. Like, we just don't have the actual numbers to do that, right? You have too many people here that are undocumented or not citizens. You have too many people that aren't 18. So that kind of takes away some of that already. And then you're just dealing with the kind of like societal systematic problems that stops people from really wanting to vote. But when we come out, they matter. And I think, if we can get, I don't know what you're predicting, Josh, but if we could get Latinos out to be 18% of the electorate statewide, it's very difficult for for Republicans to win that if the Latinos come out and if they vote, at the ranges they usually vote for for Democrats here in Arizona.
The addition I'd add to that, and is these younger Latinos that the congressman keeps mentioning, younger, progressive, and I've said this as well about younger African Americans in this country as well, is they're progressive, but they're not necessarily Democrats.
Right.
And that, they're evaluating these Democrats on things that their parents are different things than their parents are evaluating them on. They're evaluating them on opportunity, on college affordability, on legalization, on police reform. And so there's it necessitates different conversations with these targets, which we're not all the same. We don't all look the same. We don't all come from the same place. And we need different conversations, and we need to fund those conversations.
So I've got another question from somebody with personal experience. They say, my sister and her husband moved to Scottsdale a couple of years ago from San Jose, and they've noticed a large cohort of people in their age with similar social political views who've moved there in the last 5 to 10 years. Is that also part of the political change you're seeing? And how do those changing demographics or movements play into some of the remaining House seats that will need to be won at the state level?
I'm of a different opinion because everyone's like Arizona's turning blue because of these Californians moving here. It's not as many as people say to begin with. So just to be clear, it's not like we have millions of people coming here from California. So I think yes, they're coming, and yes, a lot of them are registering to be Democrats. But whatever the margins we're talking about, probably tens of thousands of votes, right? But that's nothing. What it is changing, I think, is in some areas like Scottsdale. Yeah, I think there's going to be more moderation that happens in areas like Scottsdale, which is higher income, high educated zip codes and precincts that tend to vote Republican. And if there is, a strong, network of people that move there, then that'd be great. That'll be a big change. But it's, I fear that people, think of the change that's coming just because of this, migration from the West Coast, and will invest in that for voter, for voter victories, when the migration that we should be trying to, really be investing in is the migration that's happening from south to north, and those that can legally vote and their offsprings. So that's where I think a lot of this is being driven by, more so than these movements from California.
Yeah, I think, and I mentioned that migration earlier as well. So, overall, I think the congressman is right. The one piece I'd or a little bit of a reflection on is, in some tens of, a couple, 10 or 20,000 is not nothing in the state legislative races.
Right. Yeah.
And our ability to find those voters and target them digitally, target them with, more direct mail, our ability to sort of find these new voters is really strong. But the congressman overall is right. The folks who are here in Arizona have been here in Arizona are changing over time, because the way these Republicans haven't changed over time or have gotten worse, and these districts are getting more Latino as well. So the people in the state who are from here, and I'm a transplant myself, from are making the state more blue, from purple into blue. The migration from California is helping, and is a bigger deal for us in some of these down ballot races.
So, Josh, I've got a question that I assume is for you, which is, given how the pandemic is creating a unique and unprecedented election cycle, how can we trust poll numbers? And I kind of broaden that out to, how are you thinking about polling in this crazy moment where everything looks different than it ever has before?
Yeah, so I think it depends really on, I'm not exactly sure the nature of the question, whether we can trust what we're finding at this moment is real, or whether we should, be anchoring conversations to what we're finding today versus what happens in 6 weeks, right? When COVID first sort of, in the beginning of March, when we started shutting things down and, teaching students from home, I had clients who said, should we wait 4 or 5 weeks? Should we wait 6 weeks to run surveys, right? Because who knows what COVID's going to happen. So on some of these cases, we waited 8 weeks. And then we had the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests. And should we wait 2 more weeks for that to bake in a little bit? Is that changing attitudes? So with this administration and this environment, you just can't wait. You need to go in, you need to find your survey and do your work. I'm really confident in terms, there's a lot of mistakes that as pollsters we made in 16. I think it's a different panel you want to bring together. Happy to have that conversation. We've made-
I've attended many of those panels.
That's right, so have I. And I've learned a lot from them. Many repairs we've made to some of those challenges. I'll say this though, in this age of COVID, people are a lot more responsive on phones, a lot more responsive on taking surveys on their handhelds. And, so I'm not finding as many, I don't have, real doubts about the numbers we're producing today. What they assume though is this, and this isn't my lines as well, this is also language that Pod from the AFL will tell you, right, is that these surveys assume that everybody who says they're gonna vote is gonna vote, that everybody who says they wanna vote can vote, that everybody who wants to vote has the same ability to get a ballot or get to a polling place, and that everybody who does vote, their ballot's gonna be counted the same way, right? So there's lots of things that are different in Arizona, that are different in Florida and Georgia and North Carolina that impact whether or not the people who wanna vote, say they're gonna vote and do vote, have their ballots counted the same way as they do in these other states. So I'm pretty confident our numbers in terms of the survey work is correct, but implementing them and people who wanna vote, getting those votes counted is also a different story for us and a different struggle.
So I think we have time for about one more question, and I'm going to take someone's from the participants and then add a little of my own. So there's someone who wants to know how the Arizona 6 race is looking, Dave Schweikert. And I will add to that other races that you've got your eye on down ballot, not just Biden and Kelly are going to be on the ticket, but lots of other Democrats. Where else are you looking, or think we might be able to be happily surprised?
Well, are you working on those races, Josh?
The state ledge races, yes. I'm not working in the congressional.
Congress, yeah. So I don't have any information more than anyone else, but here's a couple of things in my opinion that look good. The front-runner D-Trip endorsed candidate is outraising, the incumbent. He's very well known. He's been in politics for a while, so he does have an advantage, even though he has no money. The district is largely suburban, I would say. And it kind of goes from, you think about suburban, and then it kind of starts getting to this like ex-urban track, then it goes to truly rural areas. If Haral can solidify strongly the kind of, in my opinion, her best bet and luck is to solidify suburban areas and then work the rural areas to make sure she doesn't lose by huge margins there. She's got a real good shot. In terms of races, what am I looking at? County attorney, I think it's going to be very important, especially this year with George Floyd. We have good candidates, and I think, traditionally this is a very Republican county. Like, we might just kind of catch the wave to kind of bring in a new county attorney. And then the state rep and state ledge races. I originally was in the state house for 4 years. I was assistant minority leader. I actually did the IEs for this state. And, there's some districts that I never would have imagined that we would ever be competitive. And now it looks like there's going to be these districts where we're going to pick up seats that 2 seats, versus 1, which is going to be very exciting. I look forward to it. I think it's been really earth-shattering for the Republicans to see their losses kind of accrue. The psychological break that's going to happen if we take back the state house and we have Kelly as our U.S. senator is going to be tremendous, to the point where it'll probably break the party up in Arizona as an actual organization. That's my prediction. So I really look forward to that.
Yeah, I would just add, I know that we're running out of time here, is that the congressional district that we're talking about, it's a tough congressional district, but it's a very vulnerable Republican in terms of the ability to really define him very aggressively with the fundraising and sort of, but it is like 3 different districts. I will say too, that two of the things I'd watch is, and we've talked about the state ledge race, is there this ballot initiative that the Congressman mentioned in terms of the education funding, which is a surtax on the top 3% in the state. That is going to really focus this conversation on education in a way that we tried to in 18. In 18, we also had a ballot initiative on there that did nearly the same thing, but the Republican Supreme Court justices kicked it off of the ballot. taking away probably an $8 to $10 million spend focused on education. If that were on the ballot in 18, I really believe we would have won the state house. I don't think it would have lifted David Garcia to be our next governor, but we would have won the state house in 18. But that money, because that initiative went away, that money around education went away, and we didn't sort of capture this much energy. We didn't hold on to the energy. So I think that's a big deal. It's going to help us with these down ballot races. And the other piece I would say is, Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego up for re-election. She's having to run like 3 times in 3 years because of, one mayor resigning, finishing out his term, and running for her own 4-year term now. And, she's done a tremendous job in terms of this COVID conversation.
Yep.
She and Regina Romero down in Tucson put tremendous pressure on this governor and the state legislature to get off the backs of these mayors and let them do their job, saving lives and keep people healthy. She's up for re-election again. And I think I keep your eye on her.
And she was up, but Mayor Gallego is my ex-wife. We're really good friends, in case you guys are asking where the connection is. But she was also on the ballot, though, with cinema, if I remember correctly, too, though. Yeah. And so, which was actually really important.
Well, she had a run. She didn't get she didn't make the run. There's the runoff.
That's the runoff, right? But in that runoff, there was 2 very strong Democrats, Kate and another Democrat named Danny Valenzuela, and they put in a lot of money in usually areas that don't actually get a lot of money in 18 because every vote counted. And those two, the 2 campaigns probably plus the IEs just in the city of Phoenix was probably what, $5 to $6 million altogether, Josh? And that, you never see that type of money in, like, I live in South Phoenix, a largely Latino area. You never see that type of money coming around in November because there's no reason. All the state seats are safe. But the fact that the mayor's race was up really pushed a lot of people. And I think that same thing is going to happen it's going
to push a lot of these campaigns off of TV, though, by the way, right? These county attorney races, this mayoral race, true. Because of the Senate race, because of the presidential, because it's ground zero, these folks are not going to be on TV, which makes all the more important these other communication avenues for them.
That's true. And Kate, I know Kate, she's not going to take any chances in November. She wants to win this outright and not have to go to a runoff, and she certainly has the war chest to do it.
Wow. Well, it seems like there's a lot of reasons for national folks to be focused on and investing in Arizona. So thank you so much, both of you, for spending the time to take us through a little bit of that. And let's get together again after the election so you can tell us how we won.
Love to.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Have a good weekend, everybody. Appreciate this.
Adios.